All right, today we're going to talk about cell growth. Right? So cell growth, something that happens in your body. So when new cells are produced, right, they grow, right? But they get to a certain size and stop. Right? And the reason why they do is there are checks and balances within your body that limit the amount of cell growth. Right? So we say it's common for cells to grow and divide, creating copies. So although the process is commonly understood, there's limits, right? So it's important to know in eukaryotic organisms like you, or multi-celled organisms, cancer is simply uncontrolled cell growth, right? So here's the issue. So with bacteria, we said that growth and reproduction is exponential. So a bacteria, right, starts from a single bacterium, right, and it starts to grow. And as it starts to grow, the DNA replicates, right? And then the cell continues to grow. And as it continues to grow, it starts to pinch between the bacteria here in the middle. And then it divides into two bacteriums, and then it starts to grow. And it reproduces its DNA, and it divides. And that's called exponential. Right? We have 2 to the 0, which is 1, 2 to the 1, which is 2. And we have 4, then we have 8, right? And then we have 64, and it keeps on going. It's called exponential growth. Right? So the problem is your cells can't do that, right? So cancer is uncontrolled cell growth, right? And cancer will do that. It'll have exponential. There's no boundaries on it, right? And it'll eventually form a ball of cells called a tumor, right? So that's unhealthy. And eventually these cancer cells, by the way, if untreated, will leave and they'll find somewhere else to grow. Right? And that's called metastasis. We'll talk about that later. So limits to cell growth, right? So there are limits to cell growth. They say that every cell, or most cells in your body, regenerate every 7 years. So about every 7 years, you get rid of old cells and you make new cells. It's not all at once. It's continually happening in your body as you're replacing different types of cells. Right? So cell surface area, right, is a limitation to cell growth. As your cell grows, right, so you have things in your cell like the nucleus, right? And you have, right, your ER, and you have your Golgi, right? And you have all these different structures. If your cell could continue to grow, your organelles wouldn't, right? They would stay about the same size. Right? They would cell. So what happens is nutrients can't get from the inside, right, to where they have to be processed. So the cell becomes too large, right? The only cell that really has little limitation in your body are what they call fat vacuoles, right? Are cells that expand and hold fat because it's just storage, right? It's not really doing anything with it, right? So here's the thing. As the cell grows, right, its surface area to volume decreases, making it less efficient, right? So it's very efficient when it's small. It's really not efficient, right, when it's large. So you can see this. A small cell has a very large cell to surface area, right? Ratio. And as it grows, it becomes less efficient. You can see that graph go down there. Right, if you look at these two cats, the cat on the left, very efficient. The cat on the right, oh my goodness, very inefficient. Right? Okay. So limits to cell, right? So we're going to talk about this DNA controls, right? So DNA controls protein production. Right? And this protein production could be growth factors. And these growth factors cause cell cycle movement. We'll talk about that in our next lecture. Right, and that cell cycle movement, right, causes replication. So we say that DNA controls the cell, right? It controls protein production. And that protein production, remember the enzymes? Those enzymes, right, will control how the cell works. So the DNA must be able to effectively control the function of the cell, as well as cell increases in the size, the ability of DNA to control the external environment, right? So cancer is a problem with the DNA control, right? So this DNA control in cancer is not working, right? We'll talk about that. Right, so limits to cell growth, like we already talked about, resources, number one. Right, the rate at which a cell can manage its resources, how it can get food in, and how it can get waste out, right? It's kind of like if you didn't have a car, right? The distance you lived from the city dump, right, or to the store would determine how manageable your situation is. So remember, the rate at which a cell can manage its resources, its surface area to volume ratio. So diffusion of gases is greatly reduced. Remember, you need oxygen to diffuse in so it can enter your mitochondria and accept electrons from electron transport chain. You can make ATP, right? Or the rate at which molecules are transferred. You need that glucose. Glucose has to be able to get in, right, to make pyruvate through glycolysis, and that pyruvate has to be able to find mitochondria. Right? When the cell gets too large, it must divide. Right? Let me see if I can find my pen again. I can't find my pen. So when a cell gets too large, it must divide. Right? Cell functions dictate this. Right? So the optimum cell size and diameter is about 1 micrometer for prokaryotes or bacteria, about 10 micrometers for eukaryotes. So we're about 10 times the size, remember, because we have organelles. All right, so really short today. It means tomorrow's quiz should be relatively easy, and I will talk to you soon.